Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Mystery Science Theater 3000, episode 1312, The Bubble. This is Joel's second return episode, or his second episode after returning, or whatever, or the second one this season, and it is noticeably better than the first episode he was in. However, I don't think it's like we're back to peak 90s Joel, or even actually I was thinking the tour I saw him on right before the pandemic, I thought he was funnier in that and on the other tours than he was in this. But I still actually quite like this episode. I don't think it's kind of an interesting one because The Bubble is a 3D movie. We just watched a 3D movie with The Mask, but they didn't get the 3D print of this movie, but it's still a 3D movie. It's totally bizarre. It's like, you just did a 3D movie. I mean, I think that looked like this didn't look like the 3D was very good. So it's like, fine. But it is funny. They're like, oh, we can only get a 2D print of this one. Directly after the 3D one, I think is like pretty funny. And this is a strange one. I've heard the bubble concept of people getting trapped in a bubble, like the Stephen King thing and the Simpsons movie, which I don't think they make any reference to. Do they? I don't think they make reference to either. Maybe they do. I don't know. The thing is, they make a lot of jokes. Maybe they did. I don't remember that. But basically, this couple who the wife is in labor, they're flying and they kind of get stuck. They're flying and they land in the bubble somehow. And then everyone is repeating themselves and stuff. This is a weird one. It's sort of like a dream. It's not a great movie, but they hyped it up that this is maybe worse than Manos, and like the crew, I've heard in other places, felt it was one of the worst movies they'd ever done this season. I don't agree, and I've seen, like, I thought it was in the minority, and I looked online, it seemed like people agree with me. This seemed like kind of like maybe not a great movie, but not like a legendarily bad one, just one that seemed just sort of off, like felt like an off-brand Twilight Zone episode or Outer Limits. It does have a dream-like quality to it, which I sort of liked. And I will say, and I saw someone on Reddit say this, I'm not sure who, say this movie doesn't end so much as it just stops. And the end is super weird, but there's a certain interesting quality to it. Other ones this season, like The Mask, actually, the last couple have been like, they're definitely like cheesy or bad movies, but they're not like all-timers or anything. They're kind of things I would watch and be okay with, so you know. This episode was pretty funny. It had a critic riff, which of course I'm going to like, to buy my book. One about the one guy being drunk is like, I guess the only thing to indicate you're drunk is your shirt is untucked. The only thing to indicate that you're drunk is your shirt is untucked, which I thought was very funny. They have a lot of good moments, particularly like the Joel thing with the popcorn thing was pretty funny. The lens wear thing wasn't as much, but I liked the Joel Invention Exchange still has a good vibe to it. I think what worked better this is like the last one, it was a newer movie, and I don't think that works as well for Joel. I think he works better with films like The Bubble, which are from the 60s. It is weird that he's just doing Emily spots, and he doesn't have J. Elvis Weinstein or no one else subs in for Servo and Crow. It's just them. I do think, unlike, I think, Jonah or Emily, Joel feels better where it's just like consistent throughout. It, like, this one had a much better flow to it overall because you had the same bots throughout. I do think this is a better episode. It seems like most people didn't like the last Joel one, but I think this one like holds up strong. I'm not going to say it's even better or middle of the season. I think it's like higher, lower, basically, if I was going to. I think I will do a ranking thing later at some point for the season. I did like this episode. I had a good enough time. It was a nice little thing, but it's sort of like seeing the band you like make a new album, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess you can sort of do it. And it never get past that with him, except for like the tours, I feel great. The show, I don't, and I find that disappointing. The big thing, and I guess people consider a spoiler, I don't because it'll be advertised, is the three hosts interacting of Joel, Jonah, and Emily. Jonah's been directing, I think, most of the season, but that they're going to come together for the next one. That was pretty exciting to have multiple hosts that are going to riff and interact throughout an entire episode. Seems really cool. I will say the one host who hasn't appeared, and I don't know if he's said anything about this, is Mike Nelson. I do kind of feel like Mike Nelson nostalgia is at higher because we haven't had that like fulfilled whatsoever in this time in terms of Mystery Science Theater. I know he has riff tracks and he's doing a lot of other stuff. I'm not trying to act like he needs it, but it just feels like that's like the one avenue they haven't gone in, and I'm curious if they will. But having these three hosts together, I like their kind of like rhyme thing and like them interacting with one another. I think is going to be really interesting. I'm hoping the previous kind of star thing was like Joel coming back and J. Elvis Weinstein coming back and stuff like that. That didn't work out so well. So I'm hoping because they've all been working together for so long, this will work out very well. But it definitely like has me hyped for like a 3-host riff. I'm curious if it's just gonna be those three or those three in the box, how they're gonna do that. Very curious about that. I'm assuming there'll be ads for that around Turkey Day, so I'm less like, I don't really consider it a spoiler. But I think this is a fine little episode. Like if you like Joel and you want to see Joel again, this is the better of the two. I think it works a little better for his sensibilities. I think the jokes work a little better. I think his charisma with this Crow and Servo, I think worked out a lot better than the previous one. You know, I think you kind of had to build up cast charisma when it comes to Mystery Science Theater, and I think it worked out a little better on this. So I'm honestly a little more excited to see him like either in the next one, which he's going to be in, or if he comes back and if there is a season 14, whenever that happens, if he gets to come back for that, I'm more excited to see him as it goes on. So I feel hopeful for the future. But as of like the present of like, how do I feel about Joel in this season? It's definitely like the worst he's been since like KTMA in a lot of places. But I do think this is like on a better track, but it's not one like of this season that I want to watch again. This is not really one. I'm not going to forget it because of the weird vibe of the movie and stuff like that. But at the same point, I don't think it lands as well as you want a Joel episode to land necessarily. And it kind of stinks because I do think Joel is kind of like the Mystery Science Theater host, and you want to see him just like be as amazing as he always was. Unfortunately, not as much this time, but it's not as disappointing as the last one. And if you like Mystery Science Theater and Joel, I recommend it for just the nostalgia. I think you will just sort of be met and be okay and move on. But it kind of makes you hopeful when you hear about the next episode with the three of them, the possibility of him in the future, if that is. Things like that you'll feel better about. But in the present and the actual episode, I think this bubble will burst pretty hard, but I think you'll be blowing a new one pretty soon. So if you have seen Mystery Science Theater 3000, episode 1312, and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.